I'm Louise, 34, a graphic designer married to Thomas for 3 years now. Family dinners at Eleanor's mansion were always tense, but I never understood why my mother-in-law treated me with such cold politeness. That evening changed everything. As Eleanor served sizzling steaks to everyone at the table, my empty plate glared back at me. The dessert round repeated the pattern. Everyone got served except me. I looked at Thomas, hoping he'd speak up. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want more real-life family drama stories like this one. My life before Thomas was simple and fulfilling. I built my career as a graphic designer at a mid-size marketing agency in Chicago, known for my creative approach and attention to detail. Growing up in a middle-class family with parents who worked in education taught me the value of hard work and authenticity. My friends would describe me as outgoing, honest, and maybe a bit too straightforward sometimes. A quality that would later become problematic in my relationship with my mother-in-law. I met Thomas at an art gallery opening. I was there showcasing some of my designs, and he attended as a potential investor. Tall with thoughtful brown eyes and an easy smile, Thomas approached me with genuine interest in my work. We talked for hours that night, and by the end of the evening, he asked for my number. Our courtship was exciting. Dinners at restaurants I could never afford on my own, weekend trips to nearby cities, and deep conversations about our dreams and ambitions. What I didn't fully grasp initially was the world Thomas came from. As the only son of Harold and Eleanor Wright, Thomas had grown up in wealth and privilege. His father built a successful real estate development company, and his mother Eleanor was a formidable presence in high society circles. Thomas had attended private schools his entire life, followed by an Ivy League education. Despite this background, he seemed down to earth and unpretentious, which attracted me to him even more. After 6 months of dating, Thomas suggested I meet his parents. "They'll love you," he assured me, squeezing my hand as we drove up to their mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood of the city. The house was intimidating, a sprawling colonial with perfectly manicured gardens and a fountain in the circular driveway. I felt underdressed despite wearing my best outfit. Eleanor opened the door herself, immaculately dressed in a cashmere sweater and pearls. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she assessed me from head to toe. "So this is the graphic artist," she said, emphasizing the word artist as if it were a hobby rather than my profession. "Graphic designer, actually," I corrected gently. "Of course, dear," she replied dismissively, leading us into a living room larger than my entire apartment. Throughout that first dinner, Eleanor asked polite but probing questions about my family. When I mentioned my father was a high school principal and my mother a librarian, she nodded with a tight smile. "How quaint," she remarked. Later, she reminisced about Thomas's ex-girlfriend Natalie, whose father was apparently a state senator. When I expressed concern to Thomas on the drive home, he brushed it off. "Mom just needs time to warm up to new people. She's protective of me, that's all." This would become a pattern. Thomas making excuses for his mother's behavior, always giving her the benefit of the doubt. As our relationship progressed toward engagement, Eleanor's subtle disapproval became more evident. She would accidentally exclude me from family events, later claiming the invitations must have gotten lost. She would compliment my appearance with backhanded comments like, "That dress is quite youthful for someone your age," or "Your hair looks so much better when you style it properly." When Thomas proposed after a year of dating, I was ecstatic. The ring was beautiful, an heirloom from his grandmother. However, when we announced our engagement at a family dinner, Eleanor's response was telling. "Well, I suppose Thomas has made his choice," she said, raising her wine glass in a toast that felt more like a concession. Planning our wedding became a battleground. Eleanor insisted on controlling every detail from the venue to the guest list. When I suggested incorporating some of my family traditions, she dismissed them as too casual for a Wright family wedding. Thomas, caught between his mother and me, often sided with Eleanor to keep the peace. "It's just one day, Louise," he would say. "Let's make Mom happy." By the time we said our vows, I was exhausted from the constant negotiations. Our wedding was beautiful but felt more like Eleanor's social event than our celebration. In photos, you can see the strain behind my smile. The early months of marriage revealed a troubling pattern. Thomas would prioritize his mother's opinions and wishes over our plans as a couple. When we discussed buying our first home, Eleanor insisted on accompanying us to viewings and criticized every property I liked. We eventually purchased a house in a neighborhood she approved of, though it meant a longer commute for me. Thomas couldn't see the problem. Mom has great taste, he would argue. And she's just trying to make sure we make good investments. What he failed to understand was that with every decision influenced by Eleanor, our marriage was becoming a three-person relationship, and I was clearly the outsider. Family gatherings at the Wright household became a predictable exercise in subtle humiliation. Every Sunday dinner, holiday celebration, or family birthday became another opportunity for Eleanor to remind me of my outsider status. At first, the signs were easy to dismiss as oversight or coincidence, but over time, the pattern became unmistakable. During our first Thanksgiving as a married couple, I mentioned to Eleanor that I was allergic to shellfish when she discussed the menu. Yet somehow, every appetizer at the dinner contained shrimp or crab. "Oh dear, did I forget about your little allergy?" Eleanor said with exaggerated concern when I couldn't eat anything before the main course. "There's bread in the kitchen if you're hungry." At Christmas, everyone received thoughtful, expensive gifts from Eleanor and Harold, except me. While Thomas unwrapped a luxury watch and his sister Sophia received diamond earrings, I opened a generic scarf that still had the discount store price tag attached. When I caught Eleanor's eye, she simply smiled. "I wasn't sure what you would like, dear." Sophia, Thomas's younger sister, was the first family member to acknowledge the situation. After a particularly uncomfortable Easter dinner, where Eleanor accidentally set the table with one chair too few, forcing me to retrieve one from another room, Sophia followed me into the kitchen. "I'm sorry about Mom," she whispered, helping me wash dishes while the rest of the family had coffee in the living room. She did the same thing with my college boyfriend. She's very particular about who she considers worthy of us. Thomas doesn't seem to notice, I admitted, feeling a wave of relief at finally having someone validate my experience. Thomas has always been blind when it comes to Mom, Sophia sighed. He's her golden boy. He can't see her flaws. Frank, Thomas's uncle, was another unexpected ally. During a summer barbecue, after Eleanor made a pointed comment about my modest career achievements, Frank intervened. "Eleanor, that's enough," he said firmly. "Louise is accomplished in her field and you know it." The momentary flash of annoyance on Eleanor's face confirmed what I'd suspected. Her oversights were deliberate. The only consistent supporter in the family was Aunt Mildred, Harold's sister. A widow in her 60s with a refreshing no-nonsense attitude, she seemed immune to Eleanor's social machinations. During one family gathering, when Eleanor conveniently forgot to mention my recent promotion at work while praising everyone else's achievements, Mildred spoke up. "Louise, tell everyone about that national award. Your design campaign won," she prompted, shooting Eleanor a knowing look. My friend Barbara saw it in the trade magazine and was so impressed. These moments of support were rare islands in a sea of subtle rejection. Meanwhile, Thomas grew increasingly defensive of his mother. When I tried to discuss Eleanor's behavior with him, he would accuse me of being overly sensitive or misinterpreting her intentions. "Mom was raised differently," he would explain. "She's from old money and they have certain ways of doing things. She doesn't mean anything by it." Our arguments about his family became more frequent and heated. After one Sunday dinner where Eleanor spent the entire meal discussing Thomas's high school girlfriend and her recent divorce, I finally confronted him during our drive home. "Your mother clearly wishes you had married someone else," I said, tears of frustration welling in my eyes. "And you just sit there letting her disrespect me." "That's ridiculous," Thomas replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "She's just reminiscing. Why do you always have to make everything about you?" His words stung more than Eleanor's coldness ever had. The divide between us was growing, and I felt increasingly alone in my marriage. Despite everything, I made numerous attempts to win Eleanor over. I researched and learned to cook her favorite French dishes, hoping to impress her at a family potluck. When I presented my carefully prepared coq au vin, she barely tasted it before declaring it a bit too rustic for her palate. I spent weeks finding the perfect birthday gift for her, a rare first edition of her favorite author that cost nearly a month's salary, only to watch her set it aside with barely a glance. I even volunteered countless hours helping Eleanor organize her annual charity gala, thinking that working together might bridge the gap between us. Instead, she criticized my suggestions in front of the committee and took credit for my ideas when they were successful. Most hurtful was discovering that Eleanor actively undermined me when I wasn't present. Sophia reluctantly revealed that her mother often made disparaging comments about my background, my clothes, even my laugh, describing it as too loud for polite company. She tells people you're trying your best to fit in, Sophia admitted uncomfortably. Like you're some kind of project Thomas took on. As our third anniversary approached, the strain was showing in our marriage. Thomas and I were arguing more frequently, and he spent increasing amounts of time at his parents' house without me. I began to wonder how long I could continue fighting for a place in a family that seemed determined to exclude me. The invitation arrived in an expensive cream envelope with gold embossing. Eleanor and Harold's 40th wedding anniversary celebration. According to Thomas, it would be the social event of the season with over 100 guests, including family, friends, business associates, and members of their country club. Mom's been planning this for months, Thomas said excitedly. It's going to be amazing. I saw the event as an opportunity to finally improve my standing with Eleanor. Perhaps if I helped with the preparations, she would begin to see me as part of the family. I could help with the design work I offered. The invitations, place cards, maybe a commemorative photo display. That's literally what I do professionally. Thomas brightened. That's a great idea. Let me talk to Mom. The next day, his enthusiasm had noticeably dimmed. Mom says thanks, but she's already hired an event planner who's handling everything. She doesn't want to burden you. I swallowed my disappointment. I wouldn't consider it a burden. It would be my gift to them. She's very particular about how she wants things, Thomas said apologetically. You know how she is. A week before the anniversary party, I stopped by the Wright house to drop off a package that had been mistakenly delivered to our home. As I approached the front door, I heard laughter from the sunroom. Curious, I peeked through the French doors and froze. Eleanor sat surrounded by sample menus and fabric swatches, clearly planning the anniversary party. Beside her, leaning in closely and pointing at something on the table, was a woman I recognized immediately. Natalie Peterson, Thomas's ex-girlfriend from college, the one Eleanor never failed to mention. I knocked on the door and the women looked up startled. Eleanor recovered quickly, her smile tightening as she beckoned me in. Louise, what a surprise. You remember Natalie, don't you? Natalie stood and offered her hand, perfectly groomed in an expensive-looking suit. Of course. Lovely to see you again. Natalie has been kind enough to help with the party planning, Eleanor explained. Her event management company is handling everything. They're the best in the city. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Eleanor had rejected my offer to help so she could work with Thomas's ex-girlfriend instead. Thomas didn't mention Natalie was involved, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. Didn't he? I'm sure I told him, Eleanor replied dismissively. Natalie and I have always had such similar taste. It makes the planning process so much easier when you're on the same wavelength. The implication was clear. Natalie understood Eleanor in ways I never could. When I confronted Thomas that evening, his reaction was frustratingly predictable. Mom and Natalie have known each other for years, he said defensively. Natalie's company is very successful. It makes sense Mom would hire them. And you didn't think to warn me? I didn't think it was important. He shrugged. Natalie and I broke up ages ago. It's just business. The night of the anniversary party arrived, and I spent hours preparing, determined to look my best. Thomas complimented my dress half-heartedly, his mind clearly elsewhere. When we arrived at the venue, an exclusive country club overlooking the lake, the first person we encountered was Natalie, clipboard and hand-directing staff. Thomas, she exclaimed warmly, embracing him for slightly too long. And Louise, she added as an afterthought. Throughout the evening, I watched as Natalie was treated like family. Eleanor introduced her to everyone as practically a daughter to us, and included her in family photos. Meanwhile, I was repeatedly mistaken for a caterer or event staff by Eleanor's friends. During a quiet moment, Sophia sidled up to me at the bar. You're handling this better than I would, she murmured, nodding toward Eleanor and Natalie, who were laughing together across the room. What choice do I have? I replied, taking a large sip of champagne. Sophia hesitated. You should know. Mom still hopes Thomas will come to his senses. She thinks he and Natalie are meant to be together. Has she actually said that? I asked, my stomach nodding. Sophia nodded uncomfortably. Many times. Even after you two got married. Later that night, while looking for the restroom, I took a wrong turn and found myself in a small office. On the desk lay a guest list with Eleanor's handwriting. Next to most names were check marks, but next to mine was a question mark. In the margin, a note: seat at peripheral table. The evidence of my outsider status was now irrefutable, written in Eleanor's elegant script. The final straw came 2 weeks after the anniversary party. Eleanor announced she was hosting a special family dinner. The finest steaks in the city, she promised. From an exclusive restaurant that normally didn't offer takeout, but made an exception for valued customers like her. Everyone's coming, Thomas said excitedly. Mom wants to thank the family for making the anniversary party so special. I felt a growing sense of dread. Thomas, I need you to promise you'll stand up for me if your mother pulls something. He looked confused. Pull what? It's just dinner. You know exactly what I mean. Your mother has been excluding me from this family for 3 years. I need to know you're on my side. Thomas sighed heavily. I promise I'll pay attention, okay? But I really think you're overreacting. Mom's making a special effort with this dinner. Promise you'll say something if she treats me differently, I insisted. Fine, I promise, he said clearly, just wanting to end the conversation. But it won't be necessary. The night of the steak dinner arrived. Eleanor had arranged the dining room with her finest china and crystal. The extended family was all there. Harold, Sophia, and her husband, Uncle Frank, and his wife, Aunt Mildred, and a few cousins. Thomas and I were the last to arrive, and Eleanor made a show of greeting her son with kisses on both cheeks. Thomas, darling, I've seated you next to me, she said, taking his arm and leading him to the table. She didn't acknowledge me at all. I found my place card at the far end of the table, as far from Thomas as possible. On one side of me was an empty chair, and on the other sat Aunt Mildred, who gave my hand a sympathetic squeeze as I sat down. The evening started with cocktails and conversation. I noticed Eleanor watching me with an odd expression, almost anticipatory, as if waiting for something. When we were all seated, she announced that dinner would be served. I've ordered the finest ribeye steaks aged to perfection, she declared proudly, along with truffled potatoes and asparagus with hollandaise. For dessert, a chocolate soufflé that must be eaten immediately when served. The food arrived on covered silver platters. Eleanor personally served each plate, making a show of presenting the steaks with flourish. One by one, family members received their meals. Perfectly cooked steaks, steam rising from the plates, the aroma mouth-watering. When Eleanor reached me, she simply passed by, moving on to serve Aunt Mildred. I sat there staring at my empty place, setting the absence of food glaringly obvious as everyone else began to eat. The absence of a steak on my plate created a tangible tension in the room. I sat motionless, watching as everyone else received their perfectly cooked ribeyes. Each plate Eleanor set down contained a thick, juicy steak seared to perfection, a generous serving of truffle-infused mashed potatoes shaped into an elegant quenelle, and bright green asparagus spears draped with silky hollandaise. Sauce. The rich aroma of aged beef and butter filled the dining room, making my empty plate all the more conspicuous. For a few minutes, no one acknowledged the situation. Thomas, seated at the opposite end of the table beside his mother, cut into his steak, with apparent enjoyment, pointedly avoiding my gaze. Sophia darted uncomfortable glances my way but remained silent. Harold seemed absorbed in his meal, while Frank and his wife exchanged meaningful looks. Finally, Aunt Mildred cleared her throat. At 72, she had long since abandoned social pretense in favor of straightforward honesty. Eleanor, she said loudly, setting down her fork, you seem to have forgotten Louise's dinner. All eyes turned to Eleanor, who dabbed her lips with her napkin before responding with practiced innocence. Oh, did I? She glanced at my empty place setting with exaggerated surprise. Yes, dear, Mildred persisted. Everyone has a lovely steak except Louise. Eleanor's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I only ordered for family, she said, her voice honey-sweet, but laced with unmistakable venom. The statement hung in the air, its implication brutally clear. After 3 years of marriage to her son, Eleanor was publicly declaring that I was not family. A hush fell over the table. Harold frowned into his wineglass. Sophia's husband muttered something under his breath. Frank set his utensils down with a clatter that seemed deafening in the silence. I felt as though I'd been slapped. Blood rushed to my face as tears threatened to form, but I refused to give Eleanor the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I turned to Thomas, who was still chewing a bite of steak, his eyes fixed on his plate. Am I family or not? I asked, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. Thomas glanced up briefly, then looked away, visibly uncomfortable. Don't do this, not here, he muttered, still chewing. His dismissal was worse than Eleanor's insult. My own husband, who had promised to support me, was choosing his steak over my dignity. I looked around the table at the faces of the Wright family, some embarrassed, some pitying, some studiously avoiding my gaze. For 3 years I had tried to belong, had swallowed insults, and endured slights, all while Thomas insisted I was imagining things. Something inside me snapped. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I have something to say, I announced, my voice steadier now, fueled by 3 years of accumulated hurt and the adrenaline of finally reaching my breaking point. Eleanor's smug expression faltered slightly. Louise, really, if you're going to make a scene— I've never made a scene, I interrupted. For 3 years, I've smiled through your insults. I've pretended not to notice when you exclude me. I've made excuses for you to Thomas, telling myself you just needed time to accept me. Thomas set down his fork at last. Louise, please? I turned to face him directly. No, Thomas. You promised you would stand up for me tonight, and instead you're sitting there eating while your mother announces to everyone that I'm not family. Eleanor attempted to regain control. I think you're being oversensitive as usual. It was simply a misunderstanding about the order. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I cut in. Just like it wasn't a misunderstanding when you seated me at the far table at your anniversary party. Or when you hired Thomas's ex-girlfriend instead of accepting my offer to help. Or the countless times you've forgotten to include me in family events. Frank nodded grimly. She's right, Eleanor. This has gone on long enough. Eleanor's face hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Thomas, tell your wife she's being ridiculous. All eyes turned to Thomas, who looked trapped. This was his moment to choose, his mother or his wife. He cleared his throat. Mom, maybe you did go a bit far this time. It was a weak defense, but even this minor criticism seemed to shock Eleanor. Before she could respond, I decided to play the one card I had been saving for a more joyful occasion. If I'm not family, I said, looking directly at Eleanor, then what exactly am I as the person carrying your first grandchild? The table fell completely silent. Even the background music seemed to stop. Eleanor's face drained of color. Thomas's fork clattered to his plate. You're pregnant? He stammered, looking genuinely shocked. I nodded, fighting back tears of a different sort now. 2 months. I was going to tell you tonight after dinner. I thought it would be a happy announcement for the whole family. Thomas stood up so quickly his chair tipped backward. Why didn't you tell me first? I tried, I said quietly. Last week when you were working late, and again yesterday, you were always too busy or too tired to talk. Eleanor had gone completely still, her expression unreadable. Harold reached over and placed his hand over hers, but she pulled away. Well, she said finally, her voice strained. This changes things, doesn't it? Does it? I asked. Does it take a grandchild for you to see me as part of this family? Because I don't want my child growing up watching their mother being treated like an outsider. Sophia stood up then and moved to my side. Louise is right, Mom. The way you've treated her has been awful. We've all seen it, and none of us have had the courage to say anything. That's not true, Eleanor protested, looking around for support. Harold, tell them. Harold, who rarely spoke against his wife, surprised everyone. Eleanor, enough. Louise is Thomas's wife. She's carrying our grandchild. This ends now. I never meant to— Eleanor began, but Aunt Mildred cut her off. Save it, Eleanor. We all know exactly what you meant to do. You've been trying to push Louise out since the day Thomas brought her home. The dam had broken. Years of silent complicity were giving way to uncomfortable truths. You told me last Christmas that you were still hoping Thomas and Natalie would get back together, Sophia revealed, even though he was already married to Louise. You've referred to Louise as temporary to your friends, Frank added. Mildred and I both heard you. Thomas looked stunned by these revelations. Mom, is that true? Eleanor's composure finally cracked. I only wanted what's best for you, Louise, isn't from our world. She doesn't understand our traditions, our values. My values don't include treating people as less than, Thomas, interrupted his voice firm for the first time that evening. I can't believe you've been doing this behind my back. I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a deep sadness. This confrontation wasn't what I had wanted. I had simply hoped to be accepted, to build a life with the man I loved without constant undermining from his mother. I'm going home, I said quietly. I've had enough humiliation for one evening. Thomas moved toward me. I'll come with you. I shook my head. I need to be alone right now. You need to decide where you stand, Thomas. Really decide, not just say what you think I want to hear. With that, I walked out of the dining room past the expensive artwork and family photographs where my face rarely appeared and out into the cool night air. As I drove away from the Wright mansion, I couldn't help wondering if I was also driving away from my marriage. The 20-minute drive home from the Wright estate felt like crossing an ocean. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I replayed the evening's events. The shocked faces around the table when I announced my pregnancy. The look of betrayal on Thomas's face, as if I were the one who had done something wrong by not telling him privately first. Eleanor's momentary loss of composure before she tried to regain control of the situation. I hadn't planned to reveal my pregnancy that way. I'd imagined a private romantic moment with Thomas, followed by a joyful announcement to the family. Instead, I'd used our unborn child as a weapon in a family war I never wanted to fight. When I arrived home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the darkness of our living room, my hand resting on my still flat stomach. I'm sorry, I whispered to my baby. That's not how I wanted to welcome you to the world. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls from Thomas, but I couldn't talk to him yet. I needed time to think, to decide what I wanted. For 3 years, I had compromised, accommodated, and made excuses for both Thomas and Eleanor. I had diminished myself to fit into a family that never intended to make room for me. Could I raise a child in that environment? Would Thomas ever truly put our family first? Around midnight, I heard a key in the lock. Thomas entered cautiously like a stranger, unsure of his welcome. He looked disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. Louise, he called softly. Are you here? I didn't answer, but he found me in the living room, still sitting in the dark. Can we talk? He asked, switching on a lamp. Now you want to talk, I said flatly. After 3 years of ignoring the problem, Thomas sank into the chair opposite me. I didn't know how bad it was. I never heard Mom say those things about you. Because you didn't want to hear them, I replied. I told you how she treated me when you weren't around. You dismissed me every time. I thought you were exaggerating, he admitted. Mom's always been particular. I thought you just needed to get used to her ways. Her ways include treating me like I don't exist, I said. Tonight wasn't an isolated incident, Thomas. It was just the first time she did it so publicly that you couldn't ignore it. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. After you left, everything fell apart. Dad actually yelled at Mom. I've never heard him raise his voice to her before. Sophia was crying. Uncle Frank and Aunt Mildred left without saying goodbye. And your mother? She tried to blame you at first, said you were being dramatic. But no one was buying it this time. Dad told her she needed to apologize to you, to really apologize, or he would reconsider their relationship. This surprised me. Harold had always seemed content to let Eleanor rule their social world. What did you say to her? I asked, watching Thomas carefully. He hesitated. I told her I was disappointed in her, that I couldn't believe she'd been undermining our marriage all this time. Disappointed, I repeated. That's it. What did you want me to say? I wanted you to be outraged. My voice rose as the emotions I'd been suppressing burst forth. Your mother publicly humiliated your wife, announced to everyone that I'm not family, and you were disappointed. She's been trying to sabotage our marriage for years, and you've let her play flawless." Thomas looked genuinely confused. What was I supposed to do? Cut off my mother? You were supposed to set boundaries, to tell her that disrespecting me means disrespecting you. To make it clear that I am your family now, and if she wants to be part of our lives, she needs to accept that. He was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know how to do that," he finally admitted. "I've never stood up to Mom before." The confession hung between us, sad in its honesty. Thomas had been raised to accommodate his mother's demands, to prioritize her feelings above all else. In marrying me, he had created an impossible situation for himself, caught between a wife who expected equal partnership and a mother who demanded absolute loyalty. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice calmer now, "and I need you to be completely honest. Do you want this baby?" His head snapped up. "Of course I do. How can you even ask that?" "Because you've never once mentioned wanting children. Because every time I brought up the future, you changed the subject. Because I'm starting to realize I don't actually know what you want from this marriage." Thomas moved to kneel in front of me, taking my hands in his. "Louise, I want you. I want our baby. I want us to be a family. Even if that means standing up to your mother, even if it means putting distance between you and your parents until they can respect our marriage." He swallowed hard. Yes, I should have done it a long time ago. I wanted to believe him, but years of disappointment had taught me to be cautious. "Words are easy, Thomas. I need to see action." "Tell me what to do," he said earnestly. "Whatever you need from me, I'll do it." "I need space," I replied. "I'm going to stay with Amanda for a while. I need time to think about whether this marriage can work." His face fell. "You're leaving me. I'm giving us both room to figure out what we really want. You've spent our entire relationship caught between your mother and me. Maybe you need time without either of us telling you what to do." "I don't need time," he insisted. "I know I want our marriage to work." "Then prove it," I said simply. "Not with words or promises, with actions." The next morning, I packed a suitcase and drove to Amanda's apartment. My oldest friend welcomed me with open arms and no judgment. I told her everything, crying in her kitchen as I recounted years of subtle cruelty, culminating in the empty plate at the dinner table. "You should have left years ago," Amanda said, pouring me herbal tea. "Thomas has let you down over and over." "I know," I sighed, "but I loved him. I still do." "Sometimes love isn't enough," she replied gently. "Not if there's no respect." Over the next few days, Thomas called and texted constantly. I responded sparingly, maintaining my distance while processing my feelings. On the third day, my phone rang with an unexpected caller, Eleanor. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Hello, Eleanor." "Louise." Her voice was tight, controlled. "I think we should talk in person." "I don't think that's a good idea right now." "Please," she said, the word sounding foreign in her mouth. I need to speak with you." Curiosity won out over caution. "Fine, but not at your house. There's a coffee shop on Maple Street. I can meet you there tomorrow at 10. The following morning, I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner with a clear view of the door. Eleanor Wright entered precisely at 10, scanning the room before spotting me. She looked different, less imperious, almost uncertain as she approached. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting down across from me. "What do you want, Eleanor?" She folded her hands on the table. "Harold is very upset with me. He's sleeping in the guest room, he says." She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "He says I've been cruel to you." "You have been," I confirmed, "for 3 years." I never saw it that way. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. "I was protecting my family. Thomas was raised with certain expectations, certain traditions, and I wasn't good enough for them. I finished for her." "You were different," she corrected. "You didn't understand our world." "I tried to," I pointed out. "You never gave me a chance." Eleanor was silent for a moment. "Thomas came to the house yesterday. He was angry. I've never seen him like that before. He said if I couldn't treat you with respect, he would cut us off completely. He said he wouldn't let his child grow up with a grandmother who treated its mother like an outsider." I felt a surge of pride and cautious hope. Perhaps Thomas was finally finding his voice. "What do you want from me, Eleanor?" I asked again. I want a second chance, she said, the words clearly difficult for her. I don't want to lose my son. Or my grandchild. Notice you didn't mention not wanting to lose me, I observed. Her lips tightened. I'm trying, Louise. This isn't easy for me. It hasn't been easy for me either. 3 years of insults, exclusion, and manipulation. 3 years of watching my husband choose his mother over me time and again. Thomas loves you, Eleanor said quietly, more than I realized. That's not enough. Love without respect and support isn't enough. Eleanor nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. Harold said something similar. We sat in silence, 2 women connected by love for the same man but divided by years of hostility. I can't promise we'll ever be close, I finally said. But if you genuinely want to try again, I'm willing to establish some ground rules. Such as, Eleanor asked, wariness creeping back into her tone. You treat me with respect, not just when others are watching, but always. You acknowledge that Thomas, our child, and I are a family unit now, and your opinion comes second to our decisions. You never again try to manipulate Thomas against me or undermine our marriage. Eleanor looked as though she wanted to argue, but restrained herself. And if I agree, then we start over, slowly. I'm not moving back home until Thomas and I work through our issues, but we can begin to rebuild trust. You have my word, Eleanor said, formally extending her hand across the table. I hesitated before shaking it. Actions, Eleanor, not words. I'll be watching for actions. As she left the coffee shop, I wasn't certain whether anything would really change, but something had shifted, not just with Eleanor, but within me. I had finally stood up for myself, had named the abuse that had been happening for years. Whatever came next, I would face it with newfound strength. I had finally stood up for myself. Later that day, Sophia called to check on me. Mom told us about your meeting, she said. Dad's still barely speaking to her. Do you think she meant what she said about trying to change? Sophia sighed. Mom doesn't change easily. But I've never seen Dad stand up to her like this before. And Thomas, he's different, Louise. It's like he finally sees clearly for the first time. I hope so, I said. For all our sakes. That evening, Thomas asked if he could come to Amanda's to talk. When he arrived, he carried a small wrapped package. What's this? I asked, accepting it cautiously. Open it, he urged. Inside was a key. I don't understand, I said, looking up at him. It's a key to our new apartment, he explained. I put our house on the market yesterday. I found us a place downtown closer to your office. It's a fresh start away from my parents' neighborhood. I stared at him in shock. You sold our house without talking to me. Not sold yet, he clarified quickly, but listed. I wanted to show you I'm serious about putting us first. That house was always more my mother's choice than ours. The gesture was imperfect. Making such a big decision without me contradicted the very partnership I was asking for, but the intention behind it touched me. Thomas was trying to demonstrate independence from his mother in the most tangible way he could think of. I've also started seeing a therapist, he added, to work on setting boundaries with my family. I know I have a lot to learn about standing up for us. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of real hope. Thomas wasn't just making empty promises. He was taking concrete steps toward change. I'm proud of you, I said softly, but we still have a long way to go. I know, he acknowledged, but I'm all in, Louise. You and our baby are my priority now. I'll prove it to you every day if that's what it takes. I didn't move back home that night or the next, but I did agree to tour the apartment Thomas had found and to attend a counseling session with him the following week. Small steps toward rebuilding what had been broken. As for Eleanor, only time would tell if she could truly change. But the balance of power had shifted. She no longer held the upper hand in our family dynamic. And for the first time since I'd married Thomas, I felt like an equal partner rather than an unwelcome intruder. The empty plate at the dinner table had been meant as a final exclusion. Instead, it had become the catalyst for reclaiming my place, not just at the right family table, but in my own marriage. The next month passed in a delicate dance of tentative reconciliation. Thomas and I began marriage counseling twice weekly, unpacking years of unhealthy patterns and communication failures. Our therapist, Dr. Rachel Martinez, didn't mince words about the damage Eleanor had caused. "Your mother created a triangulated relationship," she told Thomas during our third session. "She positioned herself as a third party in your marriage, and you allowed it. That's a common pattern in enmeshed families, but it's incredibly destructive." Thomas nodded, no longer defensive when his relationship with his mother was questioned. "I never saw it until that night at dinner. It was like suddenly seeing a pattern that had been there all along. I stayed at Amanda's apartment through those early weeks, needing the emotional space to process everything. Thomas respected my boundaries while consistently demonstrating his commitment to change. He visited the apartment I shared with Amanda 3 times a week, always bringing prenatal vitamins or pregnancy books, eager to be involved in the pregnancy he'd initially learned about in such painful circumstances. "I've been reading about the first trimester," he told me one evening as we sat on Amanda's balcony. "The baby is only the size of a blueberry right now, but they already have a heartbeat. That's amazing." His genuine excitement about our child touched me deeply. This was the partner I had always wanted, engaged, supportive, putting our family first. Meanwhile, the Wright family dynamics were undergoing their own transformation. Harold had apparently made good on his threat, moving into their vacation home in Michigan, until Eleanor agreed to counseling. According to Sophia, who called me weekly with updates, Eleanor was initially furious but eventually relented when she realized Harold was serious about their separation. "Dad told her she needs to examine why she's so controlling," Sophia reported. "He said her behavior toward you was just the most extreme example of how she tries to manipulate everyone around her." Aunt Mildred became an unexpected mediator between the fractured family members. She invited me to lunch 3 weeks after the disastrous dinner, greeting me with a warm hug. "You did what none of us had the courage to do," she said, squeezing my hands. "You broke the spell Eleanor has held over this family for decades." "I never wanted to cause trouble," I admitted. "I just wanted to be treated with respect." "That's not causing trouble, dear. That's setting a healthy boundary. Something this family has needed for a very long time." Mildred suggested a carefully orchestrated family gathering. Not at Eleanor's house, but on neutral territory at a private room in a restaurant. "No pressure," she assured me. "But I think it would be good for everyone to see each other in a controlled environment. I'll be there the whole time to run interference if needed." I agreed cautiously on the condition that Thomas and I would arrive together and leave together. The meeting was set for the following Sunday brunch. When the day arrived, I felt nauseous with anxiety, though that may have been partly due to my pregnancy now entering its 3rd month. Thomas held my hand firmly as we entered the restaurant, whispering encouragement. "Remember, we can leave anytime you want. Just say the word." Eleanor and Harold were already seated when we arrived, along with Sophia, her husband, Uncle Frank, and Aunt Mildred. Eleanor looked up as we approached, her expression guarded but not hostile. Harold stood immediately, embracing me with unexpected warmth. "It's good to see you, Louise," he said sincerely. "You're looking well." The tension was palpable as we took our seats. Thomas positioned himself between me and his mother, a physical manifestation of his new protective stance. Aunt Mildred took charge, keeping the conversation flowing with neutral topics: the unseasonably warm weather, Frank's new sailing hobby, Sophia's recent promotion. Gradually, the atmosphere relaxed somewhat, though. Eleanor remained uncharacteristically quiet. When our meals arrived, I couldn't help noticing the irony. We had all ordered different things, no steak in sight. Eleanor watched as I received my plate, her eyes flickering to my still flat stomach. "How are you feeling?" she asked suddenly, her first direct question to me all morning. "The morning sickness is challenging," I answered honestly. "But otherwise everything's progressing normally." She nodded, seeming unsure how to continue. After a moment's hesitation, she reached into her purse and withdrew a small gift bag. "I got something, for the baby." She slid it across the table toward me. "It's nothing much." I opened it cautiously to find a silver rattle, clearly antique and beautifully crafted. "It's lovely," I said, genuinely surprised. "It was Thomas's," Eleanor explained, "and Harold's before that. Family tradition." The word family hung in the air between us, weighted with new meaning. This small gesture, Acknowledging my child as part of the right lineage represented a significant shift. "Thank you," I said simply. Eleanor nodded again, her usual confidence still subdued. "Harold and I have been seeing a counselor," she volunteered unexpectedly. "It's been illuminating." Harold reached over to squeeze her hand. "Eleanor is working on understanding why she's felt the need to control the people she loves," he explained. "It's not an excuse for how she treated you, Louise, but we're trying to address the root causes." I appreciate that, I replied carefully. As brunch continued, I observed the subtle changes in the family dynamic. Harold spoke up more often, no longer deferring to Eleanor's opinions. Sophia openly disagreed with her mother about a political topic without the fearful glances I'd seen in the past. Even Eleanor herself seemed different, less rigid, more willing to listen. After the meal, as we prepared to leave, Eleanor approached me while Thomas was settling the bill. "I know a single brunch doesn't fix anything," she said quietly. "And I know you have every reason to distrust me, but I am trying, Louise. I realize now what I almost lost. My son, my grandchild, my husband's respect. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just hope you'll allow me the opportunity to earn it over time." It was the most humble I'd ever seen her. Without the perfect posture and imperious tone, she suddenly looked older, more vulnerable. "I can't promise we'll ever have the relationship you have with Sophia," I told her honestly. "But I'm willing to try if you are. For Thomas's sake and for our child." She nodded, accepting these terms. "That's all I can ask for." 2 days after the brunch, Thomas and I toured the apartment he had found downtown, a spacious 3-bedroom in a converted historical building with high ceilings and large windows. It was nothing like the suburban house Eleanor had pushed us toward, but it felt right for us, urban, creative, and completely our own. "I can see us raising a family here," I said, standing in what would become the nursery sunlight streaming through the windows. Thomas wrapped his arms around me from behind his hands, resting gently on my stomach. "Does that mean you'll move in with me again?" I turned to face him. "Yes. But we keep going to counseling. And we maintain clear boundaries with your family." "Absolutely," he agreed without hesitation. "We're a team, Louise. You and me and this little one. Everyone else comes second." We moved into the new apartment the following week. Thomas insisted on handling the heavy lifting, citing my pregnancy, though I was perfectly capable of carrying boxes. I recognized this as the protective fatherly instinct kicking in and found it endearing rather than controlling. As I unpacked our belongings in this new space, I felt a sense of fresh beginning. We weren't just arranging furniture differently. We were reconstructing the foundation of our marriage. Eleanor called once a week, her conversations still somewhat awkward, but genuinely trying. She asked about my pregnancy symptoms and refrained from offering unsolicited advice. A remarkable show of restraint from a woman who had previously dictated every aspect of our lives she could reach. Sophia became a more regular presence in our lives, often stopping by the apartment after work with pregnancy books or little gifts for the baby. "Mom's really trying," she confided one evening, while Thomas was out picking up dinner. "She's actually listening in therapy. Dad says she's addressing issues that go back to her own childhood." "Do you think she can really change?" I asked skeptically. Sophia considered the question. "I think she's already changing. Is she going to become a completely different person, number? But I think she's finally recognizing the damage her controlling behavior has caused." By the end of my first trimester, Thomas and I had established a new normal. Our home was truly ours, our decisions made together without Eleanor's influence. We had dinner with his parents once every 2 weeks. Always in public places at first, gradually working up to more intimate settings as trust slowly rebuilt. The transformation wasn't perfect or complete. Eleanor occasionally slipped into old patterns, making subtle comments about our apartment being cozy, her code for small, or questioning our choice of obstetrician. But Thomas now recognized these behaviors immediately and addressed them directly, sometimes with humor, sometimes with firmness, but always with clarity about our boundaries. More importantly, I had discovered my own voice. The woman who had sat silently through 3 years of subtle abuse was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. someone who knew her worth and wouldn't accept anything less than respect. As my baby grew within me, I felt myself growing too, not just physically, but in confidence, in self-assurance, in the certainty that I deserved my place at any table where I chose to sit. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, our daughter Lily came into the world after 18 hours of labor. Thomas never left my side, coaching me through each contraction, his face a mixture of awe and terror as we navigated the intensity of childbirth together. When the doctor placed our daughter on my chest, her tiny body warm against my skin, the journey that had brought us to this moment seemed both impossibly long and strangely worth every painful step. "She's perfect," Thomas whispered, tears streaming down his face as he gently touched Lily's dark hair, just like her mother. The hospital room soon filled with visitors, Amanda bearing flowers, Sophia cooing over her niece, Harold beaming with grandfatherly pride. And then hovering uncertainly in the doorway, Eleanor clutching a large gift bag and looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Come in, Eleanor," I invited, surprising myself with a genuine welcome in my voice. "Come meet your granddaughter." She approached the bed, cautiously peering down at Lily, with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, pure, unguarded love. "She has the right nose," Eleanor observed softly. "And your eyes, Louise?" "Would you like to hold her?" I offered. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she took Lily, cradling her with unexpected tenderness. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "I'm your grandmother." Something shifted in that moment. Not a complete transformation, but another step in the gradual rebuilding of trust. As Eleanor held Lily, I saw not the intimidating society matron who had tormented me for years, but simply a woman welcoming a new generation into her family. The months that followed brought adjustments for everyone. Parenthood tested Thomas and me in ways we couldn't have anticipated. The sleepless nights, the constant worry, the overwhelming responsibility of caring for this tiny human. But unlike the challenges of our early marriage, we faced these as a united front, supporting each other through each exhausting day and night. Thomas proved himself to be the partner I had always hoped for, changing diapers without complaint, taking night feedings with bottles of expressed milk, so I could sleep fiercely protective of both Lily and me. The man who had once been unable to stand up to his mother now had no trouble setting boundaries with anyone who encroached on our family's well-being. Eleanor's transformation continued, though not without occasional setbacks. The first time she visited our apartment after Lily's birth, she arrived with a complete nursery redecoration plan, assuming we would welcome her expertise. Thomas gently but firmly explained that we had already designed the nursery exactly as we wanted it. But the crib would look so much better against the other wall, Eleanor insisted. "Mom," Thomas said patiently, "this is our home and our daughter. We appreciate your ideas, but the final decisions are ours." Eleanor looked momentarily stung, then nodded. "You're right. I'm overstepping again." This acknowledgement, something the old Eleanor would never have conceded, demonstrated how far she had come. Through consistent therapy and Harold's unwavering insistence on healthier family dynamics, she was learning to recognize and correct her controlling behaviors. Our relationship evolved into something I never could have imagined during those painful early years. Not the close mother-daughter bond Eleanor might have hoped for, but a respectful friendship based on our mutual love for Lily and Thomas. We found common ground in unexpected places. Eleanor's knowledge of art history complemented my design background, leading to interesting conversations about exhibitions and architecture. Aunt Mildred, watching this gradual thawing between us, remarked, "Nothing changes a family like a baby. They have a way of rearranging priorities." Indeed, Lily had become the center of a new family constellation. Sunday dinners, once a source of anxiety and exclusion, transformed into genuinely pleasant gatherings where all of us, Harold and Eleanor, Sophia and her husband Aunt Mildred, and occasionally Uncle Frank and his wife, came together to celebrate our growing child. On Lily's first birthday, I organized a small party at our apartment. As I arranged cupcakes on a platter, I caught sight of Eleanor in the living room, sitting on the floor in her expensive silk pantsuit, helping Lily stack blocks. The woman who had once served steak to everyone but me was now completely focused on making my daughter laugh, seemingly unconcerned with maintaining her usual perfect image. Thomas came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Look at them," he said, nodding toward his mother and daughter. "Who would have thought we'd end up here after that dinner?" "Not me," I admitted. I was ready to walk away for good that night. "I'm so glad you didn't," he said, kissing my temple. "You forced all of us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for years. You made our family healthier." The journey hadn't been easy. There had been painful conversations, tears, and moments of doubt. But standing in our sun-filled apartment, watching my daughter play with the grandmother who had once rejected me, I felt a profound sense of peace. My graphic design career had flourished during this time as well. The strength I discovered in standing up to Eleanor translated into professional confidence. I had launched my own small design studio, specializing in branding for women-owned businesses, and was already building a solid client base. That evening, after the party guests had gone and Lily was asleep in her crib, Thomas and I sat on our balcony sharing a bottle of wine. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if I hadn't spoken up that night?" I asked. Thomas considered the question. "We probably would have continued in that unhealthy pattern until something broke, likely our marriage. I was so blind to what was happening, so conditioned to accept my mother's behavior as normal. And now? Now, I understand that true family isn't about blood or tradition or doing what's expected," he said thoughtfully. "It's about respect, support, and making room for each other to grow. It's about choosing each other every day, especially when it's difficult." His words captured exactly what I had learned through our ordeal. Family wasn't defined by whose table you sat at, but by who made space for you to be your authentic self. Sometimes that meant walking away from a table where you weren't valued. Sometimes it meant building your own table and inviting others to join you on your terms. Eleanor had served steaks to everyone but me that night, intending it as the final act in a long campaign to push me out of her family. Instead, it had become the catalyst for rebuilding that family on a healthier foundation, one where everyone, including Eleanor herself, could show up more authentically. As new parents, Thomas and I were now creating our own family traditions. Ones based on inclusivity, rather than exclusion, on celebration, rather than judgment. The empty plate that had once symbolized my outsider status had become a powerful reminder of how far we had all come. Sometimes I reflected the most important seats at the table are the ones we have to fight for. Not because they weren't meant for us, but because claiming them forces everyone to recognize our true value. Thomas raised his glass. "To fighting for your seat at the table, and teaching our daughter to do the same." As we clinked glasses under the starlit sky, I felt gratitude for the painful journey that had brought us to this peaceful moment. The steak dinner that was meant to exclude me had instead become the turning point toward genuine belonging. Not just in Thomas's family, but in my own sense of self-worth. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation? What gave you the courage to finally speak your truth? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and hit that share button to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you always deserve a seat at the table.